I was wrong about items in Diablo 4. It's true, the items are way better than initially we expected. Nice.
Hi, Zizrin here with another video, and today I want to talk to you about itemization. So, we've now played over 100 hours of Diablo 4 already. We got the
Yes.
world first push to level 100 on
True.
hardcore. I was wrong. I wanted to talk a little about that, and I'm very excited to be wrong because when first especially playing the level 25 demos and seeing all the gear in Diablo 4, that was one of my biggest concerns. I thought the gear was basically green up arrow equals more better, and I was wrong. I'm very
That is true. That was a huge concern for everyone who actually wanted a good Diablo experience in 4. Because Green Arrow means good has been a classic Blizzard thing for such a long time. And it's a happy surprise that it's not the case at all. And even in the early levels, which is seriously a surprise.
pleasantly surprised by the itemization system in Diablo 4.
Yep.
And you know what? I thought it was going to be absolutely dog shit. Even though it is very, very basic in a way, it surprised.
When he says very, very basic in a way, he kinda is correct a little bit, but let me explain what he actually means when he says basic. He is a Path of Exile player, and Path of Exile players are unreasonably out of this world, completely lost in the stratosphere, elitists when it comes to things like this. You see, to do Path of Exile in the late game, you need to craft things, because that's just the best way to play the game, technically. And to understand crafting, you need to literally dedicate at least 100 hours reading literal novellas because the game doesn't explain anything to you and it's absolute garbage. So you need to read Wikipedia article after Wikipedia article and open spreadsheets of data that show you what is craftable on what item and what base and what not. It is absolutely not complex. It's artificial complexity. Now, admittedly, Path of Exile does have a lot more prefixes, suffixes, and all of that stuff than Diablo currently, but that does not necessarily mean that that makes items more unique or special. In fact, Diablo currently is absolutely blasting Path of Exile when it comes to actual gear that changes the way your character is built, which Path of Exile has some, but not a lot.
Surprisingly enjoyable. So they actually didn't do too bad here. Now there are obviously a lot of things you can improve upon, especially having
True,
more unique items. But
true.
yeah, I wanted to make a video talking about the fact that I was wrong and what I do like about the system. So we'll talk a little bit about my specific gear pieces and stuff like that. Well, one thing that I
He's
thought was
pretty
very odd was,
stacked,
well, the
yo.
main stats don't really do anything. Well, they do at the end game, and that's something I said in my video initially was, well, it probably will be impactful at the end game. It isn't early. Now, Wolsten actually
Yeah,
has a
that's
similar
true.
system, but the int stats and stuff like that scale based on your level. I actually think Diablo 4 could benefit from something like that. We're getting, 30 int at level 20 or level 30 would actually be a huge increase. And while it is actually an impactful endgame increase,
That
endgame you
is
might want
true.
70 or 80.
You can literally see 10 int is the equivalent of 1%. That's not really great statistics right there. And while you're leveling, you get maybe like 50 int on total on your gear if you're really hunting it for it, which means that's a 5% increase by intelligence means. Not great. Not great. And resistance is half of it.
80 int for it to have a similar effect. I actually think that's pretty good because that makes that stats are always a relevant and exciting stat to get throughout the game. Having some sort of scaling on that could be pretty beneficial. I was actually trying to stack int here, so whenever I was able to get pieces with like 80 int, etc., which I think I have on something,
Ooh.
at least I have 63 int here, and I was looking for that. Like, that was an actual good thing for me to get. And there are obviously like groups of stats that can happen on items, and it does have basically item levels similar to Path of Exile. For example, item power, I can't remember exactly what it goes up to, but it goes up to something like 880, or it's close to 900, I think. And I think the
Pretty
highest
good.
I have is 813. Now, this is similar to item level in Path of Exile. And if you're wondering, what exactly is similar. 720 item power is the same as item level 86, basically, in Path of Exile. Because that means that there are thresholds. Let's say that the max possible cooldown on a helmet is 19% fully upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
That would actually be available already at 720, and you just need to be lucky. There's not a huge benefit of item power past 720. It basically upgrades the armor, which is important, and it upgrades the damage per second, which is also important. So item power is the most important on your weapon. It is still important on your gear because armor is a very big.
Okay, let me explain that for people who actually don't play Path of Exile games like this. He just explained one basic crafting thing. So there are item levels on items, and item levels means what rolls that can get. It doesn't mean that an item level 100 can get, for example, plus the maximum HP. No, item level 100 can get a plus to maximum HP, and an item level 800 can get a roll to maximum HP. But the difference here is how big the plus can be. Item level 100 cannot roll the same amount maximum as the 800 because there's thresholds. One threshold is like between 1 and 10 HP. The other threshold is between 5 and 20 HP. The third threshold is between 15 and for example 40 HP. And those thresholds can be rolled into by item levels.
Big source of mitigation, but it is imperative that you do get 720 plus. And that's because, similar to Path of Exile having tiers, like, let's say that I don't have a spreadsheet open with all the
Please
stats
don't
right now,
explain
but
it
let's say
after I
that
explained
20
it.
cooldown reduction, that you can actually roll at 720. A lot of items have their own stats, right? Like, I
Yeah,
can't get
okay.
cooldown reduction on my chest, I can't get it on my gloves,
Yes.
and you... At some point, I think this happened for me between like level 60 and level 80, where I started realizing what stats I really needed to look out for.
You know what I don't currently like about the itemization of Diablo 4? It's essentially almost the exact similar as the itemization as Diablo 3 was initially. For example, these gloves are, if we ignore the skill ranks and things in Lucky Strike, these gloves are a copy-paste of how itemization looked in Diablo 3 at the very, very start. That certain pieces, for example, gloves and shoulders, can roll critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and so on. So I'm kind of a little bit afraid that we don't dredge in the ways that Diablo 3 did, that there are always 100% maximum best stats that you can roll on, for example, gloves, because that's the only slot that can give crit ratio and crit damage.
For on what pieces of gear. Like, not every piece of gear can have plus level of ice shards, right? Or plus level of, for example, your mastery skills, your defensive skills, or your core skills. So,
Yep.
for example, here we have +2 ranks of all mastery skills, and you can't get that on every piece. So, at some point, you start getting
Basic
used to the fact that,
itemization.
well, I can get Ice Nova, Ice Armor, and Teleport on my boots. I can get mana cost reduction, and you sort of make like a rough list of maybe 6 stats that you want per item, and you start looking for an item that actually has 4 out of the 6 stats that you want.
Yeah.
For example, very, very important for me to get cooldown reduction on my offhand, but I also really want high damage per second. So I was looking for lucky hit chance, crit chance, intelligence. Crowd control duration isn't bad, but I mostly was happy with this because it was 1200 damage per second. And you can also, you can upgrade or change one stat. For example, on this one, I think it's the intelligence I'm rerolling. You can see that it's marked in blue, and I could reroll this and eventually get either a higher tier of intelligence or a different stat that I would rather have. Another thing worth mentioning is a lot of people thought that you could reroll the stats within the tier because they noticed they were changing when they were upgrading. A lot of people that thought this was similar to Divines in Path of Exile. It is not. You can see currently that the damage to injured enemies on my Ice Heart Brace is maxed. It's 32.5.
Nice.
That means that on the preview now, it is going to be maxed here.
Admittedly, I still don't know what exactly constitutes as an injured enemy. Is that an enemy that has 99.9% HP or below 50% HP, maybe? These are some questions that need to be kind of answered, Blizzard.
As well. So it stays at the same percentage within the tier, but that gets upgraded. So if I pay another there, now this has the potential to now become 37.5. So that's kind of how that works. It stays at the same level within the tier, but it will upgrade it. So if something maybe started at level 1 with 200 maximum life, at level 5 it'll have up to 450, and if this was a higher roll, it would be 575.
Well,
We don't
that's a
have a
good
way to
ring.
like alter these rolls right now, so that means that you are actually chasing items and looking for upgrades for a long time, because you have multiple tiers, like you have tier 1 life, tier 2.
Also, a thing that I'm currently technically worried about, because I have not started the late game long enough at this point, so all of my I don't know exactly how this how the legendary gear is gonna impact. And initially, when they were talking about Diablo 4, they said, "Well, we don't want all the slots being taken up by legendaries, so you're gonna take you're gonna find these yellow items, rare items, and they're gonna be, if really rolled good, better than legendaries." But I'm not sure how much I currently see that, because again, I finished the story. I'm in currently roll tier 3, but well, it's kind of a little bit sus currently. I'm seeing a legendary, it's usually an update, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna imprint anything, honestly, on a yellow currently, and that would be sad. That would be sad that all of the items that you use are legendaries.
Tier 3, tier 4, etc. And then you have roles within those. Now, you also have different levels of items. You have ancestral, sacred, and rare items. Let's see. I don't know if I still have any normal items or if oh, here I have a sacred item. It's
Hmm.
basically sort of like tiers of item power. Like you'll quickly notice that, if this was just normal rare boots, they'd probably be like 500 item power. Sacred seems to be up to like 720-ish, 730, and then ancestral are more like closer to 800. Um,
Yep.
for uniques, this wasn't that important unless it's a weapon. So for example, here I have an ancestral unique staff. You see that this is very important because this affects the damage per second. So I'm very happy that I found a Staff of Endless Rage at ancestral with a high damage per second. However, if you're finding, for example, well, Ice Heart Brace, these are sacred, they don't have the high item power. The only thing I'm missing out on then is the armor, which isn't the end of the world. And it means that, for example, if you found a Shako as a normal unique, that would still be completely OP. So that is worth keeping in mind. The name
Interesting.
itself, like sacred, ancestral, etc., isn't really that important. It's just about the item power and the actual
Yep.
stats on the items. Let's talk a little bit about unique items. They're a little hard to see in my stash, but I did get quite a few cool ones. I ended up using Raiment of the Infinite. Thankfully, both of us got that. And it basically, after using teleport, close enemies are pulled to you and stunned. And the
Oh,
teleport
that's
cooldown
good.
is increased. Now, we both had that, so that was really, really nice because we stunned a bunch of enemies and just like suck them all together, and that makes it a lot easier to AoE them down.
That's
I was
nice.
using Ice Heart Brace a little bit as well. They're not that great. When we were pushing in a group, I wasn't using them, but for solo, they were nice. Izu's Heirloom. I actually have a max roll pair of these somewhere, and I think I will be using those at some point on a different sork because it can give you a large amount of crit chance. I got a item called a Razor Plate, which could be
Oh, that's it. Okay, items like this are cool, though. Items like this are definitely cool. Because they inspire unique builds.
really, really cool. I kind of want to make a Thorns Barb for PvP, which I just focus on tanking and
PvP, you're still gonna get one-shotted. Maybe you're gonna one-shot someone in their turn, but bruh. Why waste time? Blizzard has never balanced PvP.
people end up killing themselves on me. I think that would be really, really cool, especially against fast attacking things like a rogue or a sork. And a sork, if we can get it right, might just one tap themselves on us. And I think that would
Huh.
be really, really cool. Now, I
True.
actually really, really like unique items in the game. And I really wish there were more of them, like quite a lot more, where you end
I mean, they're gonna add. A lot of the complaints you hear now about this game is, well, there's not enough uniques. What do you mean? The game started literally with like 70 uniques, or a random number, by the way, completely random number. It started off with, X number of uniques. That's really good. And people are already, well, we would want more uniques. Yeah, obviously you would, but you can't just start the game probably with a billion uniques, because then the game would be unplayable.
end up having a choice of having 2 to 3 build enabling uniques because you don't want too many. They do end up lacking a lot of the stats that rare items and legendary items have. And I really like that. I like that it hopefully won't be the case that you'll just deck out your character in uniques, even if
Yes.
you end up getting more uniques in the game, and that you will still have like maybe 2 or 3 build enabling uniques, and then you're focusing on legendary gear. I am very worried about set items. I really hope they don't make it into the
I am worried about, I am worried about two things. Set items and rune words. If they make it into the game, they're gonna completely kill it. I think the game's gonna be absolutely over. Because set items are completely busted and they were, the only thing you cared about in Diablo 3, honestly. And well, you did care about, a legendary amulet here or there, but set items was literally what the game revolved around. There was no situation where anyone ever played without set items because they were simply completely overpowered. And that was a fault of the game of bad balancing. And the rune words, same thing. Either they're gonna be completely busted and everyone wants to use them, aka Enigma, Spirit, Grief, all of those good rune words from Diablo 2, or they're gonna be so trash no one ever uses them.
game, full stop. I hope Blizzard realized what a dangerous thing set items are, because in my opinion, that's what ruined
The only way I actually would like to see set items is like, a set item is like 2 items, and those 2 items are extremely specific for something very, very small that you want to do. That literally a set item exists, and it's only usable for, I don't know, a druid that uses some kind of random skill, because that makes it kind of viable. That is the only way I would like to see set items. As super, super ridiculously niche things that you can build around.
in Diablo 3 for me. The fact that you finish your season journey, it's like, here's
True.
a set that makes your skill do 10,000 million% more damage,
Yep.
and every
Yep.
other skill is
It's
pointless now.
it's
I do think
stupid.
there are ways to make set items good and usable, but they end up becoming either completely useless or completely
Same
overpowered,
with
and I
rune
haven't
words,
really seen
yes.
many games do anything in between. So, legendaries are a very,
True.
very important part of Diablo 4, and you can obviously extract legendary aspects, and then they'll appear here. You can now put them in any item. Now, obviously, I have already put things in these, and important to know that you can still put new ones. A lot of people don't realize that you can keep
Oh, so
putting
he
aspects.
has
So if I want to
yellows.
change my mind
Nice.
and I don't want this anymore, I could put this in, and then maybe I change my mind again, and I would put another one in. The only thing you
Or
can't
not.
do is you can't extract out of one that has been put in, right? So you can only extract
Yeah,
from
that would be
legendaries that you're
stupid.
actually finding. You do also have aspects as well from the Codex of Power. So there are loads of different ones, even loads from my class. These will appear always at the lowest level. So it actually ends up becoming really, really important to find good rolls, even of the ones you get from dungeon. A good example is this. Using a cooldown restores 15 to 25 mana. Getting 25 would be huge here for me. I actually
True.
never found one. So there is actually a very, very large benefit if you find a max roll one pretty early. You really want to save it for later until you're like really found a good item that you're unlikely to replace. So I was very, very careful with like not using any like max rolled ones. And these change your builds massively. Here, the Avalanche Key passive now applies to one additional cast, which is this endgame thing here. Your frost heals have up to a 10% chance to make your next cast of ice shards consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage, and the chance is
Wow.
doubled against vulnerable enemies. So this is
Nice.
obviously very powerful, and there's other things that were really good.
By the way, also, some classes are just so ridiculously more fleshed out compared to other classes in the game currently. Like, man, Blizzard really, really went to make the classes, the most popular classes like Source, Barbarian. Those classes are just so much more diverse and well polished than other classes.
Like, for example, this armor thing here takes my armor mitigation, which is currently 33%. I believe it made it 80 or 90. So obviously very
I mean, I haven't seen it because I haven't played it, but just look at this. He has 6 choices here. A Necromancer has 4 choices, and one of them is literally gain 10% more health. Yeah. And the other one is Your minions attack 15% more faster. Yeah. Nice. So nice, Blizzard. Thank you for loving my class.
Also, we have the mana reduction, the Ice Shard Pierce, and the more damage versus immobilized or stunned enemies. So
Big.
very many good things here that will be very build enabling. I'm working on a rogue right now, and there's several legendaries I'm looking out for. You can't use these until level 25 from the aspects. Now, one thing that's interesting is resists is kind of a dead stat. I know Crep has talked about this a lot, but armor, seeing as it works on all damage, its non-physical damage taken is reduced according to your armor contribution. It's half the mitigation, I believe. So if you have 90% physical mitigation, you have 45% all mitigation. And if we go look at my resistances here, so 52% cold resist reduces
pretty
incoming cold
bad.
damage by 26%.
Actually, not that
this
bad.
Pretty generically, it's a stat I never ever focused on.
I don't think anyone, by the way, utilizes dodge chance in any way. Maybe rogues have something inbuilt with dodge being a thing, but I don't think anyone cares about dodge chance at all.
Here, and yeah, it's not very important, especially combined and compared to things like damage reduction from elites, from vulnerable enemies, burning enemies, close enemies, nearby enemies, whatever you want to call it. Those were a lot more important and what we ended up focusing on, as well as just stacking a large amount of life, currently sitting on 12,000 life, and that was a lot more important. For offensive stats, I was focusing on getting int, damage to frozen enemies, damage to stunned enemies, nearby enemies, or sorry,
close enemies, yeah.
Crit chance, a lucky strike, etc. Cooldown was huge for the way we were playing because we were trying to do Frost Nova and teleport as much as absolutely possible. I actually didn't end up getting a high level Frost Nova. I think you can get to like 15 or 20, which would make the cooldown very low. Wow. Especially because Frost Nova loses 1 cooldown second per enemy killed up to 4 seconds. So if you get it to 8, you have a 4-second cooldown. Now, Diablo 4 is fairly limited crafting, but it works like this. So let's say I have this helmet here, and I don't use Lightning Spear. So now I can pay, the important thing here is a Forgotten Soul and 137,000 gold. I now get 7.5 more crowd control duration, or 20 mana, and 20 mana is pretty substantial. If I now replace this affix, boom. Now, next up, you can see that it still costs the same materials here, but the gold cost is now increased, so this ends up being a pretty crazy gold sink.
This is essentially the same thing as in Diablo 3, when you could reroll stats on items. You know, at some point it's just like, okay, I can't reroll anymore.
If I now do this again, it's always replacing the 20 mana. It's now highlighted in blue. I can no longer interact with the other stats. Boom.
It's not a bad mechanic, by the way.
Armor. Although the 20 mana is a pretty big deal. It is like 20% more mana. So I'm pretty happy with that, even though the armor would be very good as well. That being said, I do hope Diablo 4 ends up getting some sort of crafting system at one point. I don't want games to be too similar, but a system I wish was in every single game would be Path of Exile's Val Orb. It's basically you risk the item, and it either destroys the item, does nothing, or has a huge chance of giving a small buff to the item. And I really love the whole like risk reward thing, especially on unique items. And it ends up being just a very cool function that I'm such a huge fan of, and I think every game should have that risk reward as sort of.
I love seeing in the POE trade all of the bricked wall items. You just know someone bricked it like there's no tomorrow. Oh, so good.
A final outcome to an item if you are bold enough to use it. Here, for example, is another craft. So this is actually a really good amulet. It could be an upgrade for me. It's got +1 defensive skills, decently high cooldown reduction, which I think will be higher than my current one once I get it up to level 5. +2 ranks of glass cannon, which is a lot of damage. So more damage taken. But this strength here is not very good. Thorns. None of these are really good. So I would just replace.
Garbage.
Doesn't really matter if I replace or not.
Again.
Try again. Shock skill damage, control impairment, duration reduction.
Shock skill Nah, he's not using shock as his main damage source, though. Garbage.
I mean, yeah. I'm not getting very lucky here. I do want to be a little bit careful because the souls are actually very hard for me to get at the moment since I am level 100. And the elites are pretty hard to kill because they keep scaling with you. You do also get a lot of power from the gems. You can see I'm getting a large amount of life from these here. That is why I have 12,000. And then we have things like critical strike damage on vulnerable enemies. So Definitely worth doing the gems, particularly armor in the jewels. Remember what the other ones do, it's just resist. So armor is by far the strongest one, seeing as that
Yeah, gems kind of suck. Gems kind of suck. It's like, okay, here's the best gem for all of your weapons always. Here's the best gem for all of your jewelry always, and here's the best gem for everything rest as always. There's no in between. You know, gems are kind of just, you know, not even niche.
affects all the damage you take. So
By the way, a good way to fix gems is, I can already tell, give them stupidly unique effects, but you can only socket one type of colored gem on one item slot. For example, you know, you have a sapphire and you put it in the helmet. No other sapphires can be put in anywhere else. That would be cool. And you know, for a sapphire for a helmet would be, you know, for example, some kind of crazy effect. But for pants, it would be a completely different crazy effect. Now that would be a amazingly cool way to do gems. But Blizzard is obviously not going to ever do that, if anyone's wondering.
armor is by far the strongest one, seeing as that affects all the damage you take. So that being said, I think items were a lot better than I initially thought they were going to be, because the system is obviously a lot more simple than Path of Exile, but it is refreshingly simple. And while it is not as complex, it is still pretty entertaining and fun to find items in the game, and you're always looking for up.
I hate those words when I hear, oh, it's complex, it's Path of Exile. Bro, Path of Exile, there's nothing complex about it. The only people who think it's complex are the ones that haven't read 20 articles of Wikipedia and spent $100 learning that stuff and downloading spreadsheets. It's not complex. It's artificial complexity. But anyway, that's pretty much the video. Nice. Well played. Well played, Zizarin. In any case, this is Scooter Citizen. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.